This is in response to Professor Paul Krugman's article in the New York Times, Voodoo Economcs Next Generation from October 6, 2014. Again, another fine article by the professor. It is very important to keep going back and going back and going back to that the Republican policy of the tax cuts will pay for themselves because you'll be making so much more money. Doesn't work, never did work, and never will work. Let's go back to the beginning. The beginning was in 1980, Ronald Reagan had his idea, and George Bush, the one who became president after Reagan, called it Voodoo Economcs. And the professor has a nice little thing in there how it really was not the tax cuts that brought on the increase in GDP and the increase in jobs at that particular point in time, but the cut in the interest rates. Because I remember at that particular time, at one point in time, I was selling computers, where the computer I was selling was no bigger than the phone in front of me and had less power than the phone in front of me, no less capability. I believe it was going from about 210 to 225,000, something like that. Couldn't, whatever. But that was a long time ago, and things have gone on dynamically since then. But we still have a point where the tax rates are very low compared to the way they used to be. And we are running some deficits, but we have the same people on the Republican side coming back again and again saying the tax cuts are going to do this. So the first one that the professor mentions is Sam Brownback from Kansas, who used to be a senator, very socially conservative and obviously economically conservative. He used his state as a test tube, as a lab, and cut taxes to the bone. And right now, he is 10 or 12 points behind in the governor's election, which is coming up just in less than a month. And their revenues in Kansas are down, way down, and they can't provide the services. They can't provide the services that are vital to this. And here's the other thing: you have a situation where a sitting governor in one of the reddest states out there is behind by about 10 points going into the election, and that even moderate Republicans in Kansas are going against this guy because he cut taxes, and he's still insisting to this day that it will all work out, that these revenues will come back, because you have to continue to bow to the altar that brought you there. And that's what he's doing. Kansas, in terms of all of the states nearby, it's doing worse than all of them in all the categories. So that's the beginning of Voodoo Economcs Next Generation. Now, the big concern for the professor was that if the Republicans take the Senate, that they will then control the entire budget office and can dictate how the budget office will score things, and they want them to do something on dynamic scoring. The details of it aren't that great, but it makes it easier for the Republicans' point of view to seem more plausible when you do things a certain way. As they say, what the Republicans like to do is that when the facts don't fit their opinions, they change the facts. So this is just basically changing the goalpost to make it look like their ideas are plausible when they're really just batshit crazy. Now, Paul Ryan is one of the big ones who's in favor of this. He has been a snake oil salesman for a long time. What I would like to refer to him as is a huckster. He's a jiver. He spouts all of this stuff, and then he doesn't have the wherewithal to back it up. So he tells us how we can cut all of these things and still break even with our budget. But what he doesn't, and then he leaves it up for other people to decide how those cuts are going to come in later on. But to enact the tax cuts that he wants to enact, and then to still have a budget that breaks even, let's just say, you'd have to, and of course, you're going to increase the Defense Department. Of course, but that means every other department is going to take a dynamic hit. And we have already taken hits in all of these departments for a long time, and we need to grow them because our economy is growing, our population is growing, our needs are growing. All of this goes into effect. Now, Paul Ryan, no, he's not concerned about that. He just wants to lay out his scenario, whereas if you take all these taxes out, and then you cut to the bone, especially Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, cut them, just get rid of them. You know, that'll make the budget balance. And again, that's another version of Voodoo Economcs. And it actually is scary, because if the Senate does go into the Republican hands, that would mean that they could set the Congressional Budget Office to the parameters on how they would evaluate things. And they do the number crunchings based on the criteria that is being set by the Republicans, which would be much more favorable to the Republicans. But when you're asking someone to crunch numbers to make it look like it's that we're living in a fantasy world, and you tell them to do it, and that's their requirement, to do what you tell them to do, they're going to come up with numbers that look like that. And to the general population, it may sound very good, but it isn't. It's crap. It'll never work. It has never worked. We're going into the net, and he mentioned who else? Rand Paul, who goes in and talks about, you know, who was the last one who created millions of jobs for us? Well, that was Reagan. Of course, he said nothing about Clinton. And of course, you're going to have all of these Republicans saying the same thing, because they're going to bow down to Reagan, because that was their last great hero. They can't make Bush one the hero, because he had it all set to be a two-term president, and he lost it. And they can't make Bush two the president, because it hasn't been long enough for people to start to like him again for all the shit that he fucked up. And I mean all the shit that he fucked up. And, you know, we are millions of jobs ahead in the Obama administration than Bush ever created in his whole 8 years. Millions of jobs ahead. And why is that? It's because it doesn't make any difference. You know, he fucked up things royally. All right, so who do the Republicans have to bow to? They have to bow to Uncle Ronnie. All right, so all of these crazy nutcases are going to come out, bow under Ronnie, tax cuts, get rid of Social Security, you know, so all of this, and here's the thing, the professors point this out very admirably, that you need to keep this up. These people are BS artists. They only believe in this kind of stuff because they know it'll keep them elected, they know it'll keep them in power, because the truth just doesn't work for them. And of course, that was he brought up, is that they live in an area where they can get away with this kind of stuff, because they have reinforced it to such a degree that it's basically dogma now. And it's not dogma, it's dog do. That's what it is. So again, the professor is right. Day in and day out, we need to do this. We need to move this forward, that we cannot go back to the Voodoo Economics next generation. We can't go back to the Voodoo Economics. There cannot be another generation of that crap.